which remarkable appearance was referable to the boy, who, being of an eccentric spirit and having a natural taste for tumbling, was now standing on his head and contemplating the aspect of the river under these uncommon circumstances. He was speedily brought on his heels by the sound of his master's voice, and as soon as his head was in its right position, Mr Quilp, to speak expressively in the absence of a better verb, punched it for him. "Come, you let me alone," said the boy, parrying Quilp's hand with both his elbows alternatively. "You get something you won't like if you don't, and so I tell you." "You dog!" snarled Quilp. "I'll beat you with an iron rod. I'll scratch you with a rusty nail. I'll pinch your eyes if you talk to me, I will." With these threats he clenched his hand again, and dexterously diving in between the elbows, and catching the boy's head as it dodged from side to side, gave it 3 or 4 good hard knocks. Having now carried his point and insisted on it, he left off. "You won't do it again?" said the boy, nodding his head and drawing back with the elbows ready in case of the worst. "Now—" "Stand still, you dog!" said Quilp. "I won't do it again, because I've done it as often as I want. Here, take the key." "Why don't you hit one of your size?" said the boy, approaching very slowly. "Where is there one of my size, you dog?" returned Quilp. "Take the key, or I'll brain you with it." Indeed, he gave him a smart tap with the handle as he spoke. "Now, open the counting-house." The boy sulkily complied, muttering at first, but desisting when he looked round and saw that Quilp was following him with a steady look. And here it may be remarked that between this boy and the dwarf that existed a strange kind of mutual liking. How born or bred, and or nourished upon blows and threats on one side and retorts and defiances on the other, is not to the purpose. Quilp would certainly suffer nobody to contract him but the boy, and the boy would assuredly not have submitted to be so knocked about by anybody but Quilp, when he had the power to run away at any time he chose. "Now," said Quilp, passing into the wooden counting-house, "you mind the wharf. Stand upon your head again, and I'll cut one of your feet off." The boy made no answer, but directly Quilp had shut himself in, stood on his head before the door, and walked on his hands to the back, and stood on his head there, and then to the opposite side, and repeated the performance. There were indeed 4 sides to the counting-house, but he avoided that one where the window was, deeming it probable that Quilp would be looking out of it. This was prudent, for in point of fact the dwarf, knowing his disposition, was lying in wait at a little distance from the sash, armed with a large piece of wood, which, being rough and jagged and studded in many parts with broken nails, might possibly have hurt him. It was a dirty little box, this counting-house, with nothing in it but an old rickety desk and 2 stools, a hat-peg, an ancient almanac, an inkstand with no ink, and the stump of 1 pen, and an 8-day clock which hadn't gone for 18 years at least, and of which the minute hand had been twisted off for a toothpick. Daniel Quilp pulled his hat over his brows, climbed onto the desk, which had a flat top, and stretching his short length upon it, went to sleep with ease of an old practitioner, intending no doubt to compensate himself for the deprivation of last night's rest by a long and sound nap. Sound it might have been, but long it was not, for he had not been asleep a quarter of an hour when the boy opened the door and thrust in his head, which was like a bundle of badly picked oakum. Quilp was a light sleeper, and started up directly. "Here's somebody for you," said the boy. "Who?" "I dunno." "Ask," said Quilp, seizing the trifle of wood before mentioned, and throwing it at him with such dexterity that it was well the boy disappeared before it reached the spot on which he had stood. "Ask, you dog!" Not caring to venture within range of such missiles again, the boy discreetly sent in his stead the first cause of the interruption, who now presented herself at the door. "What? Nelly?" cried Quilp. "Yes," said the child, hesitating whether to enter or retreat, For the dwarf, just roused, with his dishevelled hair hanging all about him and a yellow handkerchief over his head, was something fearful to behold.
'It's only me, sir.'
'Come in,'
said Quilp, without getting off the desk.
'Come in. Stay. Just look out into the yard and see whether there's a boy standing on his head.'
'No, sir,'
replied Nell.
'He's on his feet.'
'You're sure he is?' said Quilp. 'Well, now come in and shut the door. What's your message, Nelly?'
The child handed him a letter. Mr Quilp, without changing his position further than to turn over a little more on his side and rest his chin on his hand, proceeded to make himself acquainted with its contents. Chapter 5